Before the tournament that could finally complete Rory McIlroy's career, Grand Slam, 11 years in the making, a man who had already slipped on the green jacket Rory was chasing stood up and said something nobody wanted to. Here. He didn't say Rory's swing was the problem or that his game wasn't good enough. He said the real issue was something Rory himself couldn't fully control. And over the next year, he would double down on that same prediction. For a while, he looked completely right. Then, Rory went and proved him wrong. The man was Nick Faldo, a legendary player with 6 major championships, including 3 Masters. And just days before the 2025 Masters, he said this about Rory McIlroy. Physically, he's got it. Technically, he's got it. Mentally, where is he? Mentally. That's always been the conundrum with Rory, isn't it? That's a different kind of criticism than the one Rory usually got. Most people pointed at his swing, his putting, his course management. Faldo didn't bother with any of it. He was saying Rory had always had the game. What he didn't have was certainty in his own head, and that's a much harder thing to fix. 4 days later, Augusta gave Rory a chance to prove himself. At the 2025 Masters, Rory opened the final round with a double bogey on the first hole, clawed back to a 4-shot lead through the turn, then started giving it away again, bogey at 11, double bogey at 13, bogey at 14. It looked eerily similar to 2011, when a 21-year-old Rory took a 4-shot final round lead into Sunday and shot 80. He answered with back-to-back birdies on 15 and 17 to drag himself back into the lead, only to bogey the 18th and send the whole thing to a playoff. No script could have made it messier or more fitting for what Faldo had described days earlier. It came down to that playoff with Justin Rose and a short putt. And when Rory rolled it in to finally win the Masters, he didn't talk about his ball striking or his putter. He talked about the fight he'd had with himself all day. He said, "My battle today was with myself. It wasn't with anyone else." Faldo had said almost the same thing 4 days earlier. Now Rory was saying it in his own words. It's worth remembering who was making that prediction in the first place. Faldo had felt that exact pressure at that exact golf course more than once himself. He wasn't a pundit guessing from a studio. He'd lived it. And now Rory had just ended an 11-year wait since his last major win, completing a career Grand Slam that only 5 other golfers in the entire history of the sport had ever managed. A list that includes Gene Sarazen, Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, and Tiger Woods. That's the company Rory had just joined, and it's why the moment carried so much more than a single trophy. This wasn't just a win, it was the release of over a decade of pressure in front of the entire golf world. Rory himself said what came out of him on that final green wasn't really about one tournament. It was 11 years, maybe 14, of everything he'd been carrying and finally letting go. Faldo's read on Rory's mental state had just played out in front of the whole golf world, but Faldo wasn't finished with him. A few months later, with Rory still searching for that same form and not being able to find it, Faldo made a second prediction, and this time, it was an even bolder one. He said the emotion of winning at Augusta wasn't something a player could summon on command a second time, and that it would be tough for Rory to win another major. These were Faldo's exact words. It's like climbing Everest. You don't turn around and say, "Let's go up again next month." There was so much emotion at Augusta, and you cannot reproduce the emotion to win a major like that again. Basically, according to Faldo, the fire that got Rory to Augusta wasn't coming back easily. To be fair to Rory, 2025 wasn't a bad year by any measure. He still won the Irish Open that September and helped Europe win back the Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black. But Faldo wasn't talking about Rory's form in general. He meant majors specifically, the wins that actually change how a career gets remembered. And on that front, Rory's own words were about to prove Faldo right again. At the US Open that June, Rory admitted it himself, without anyone asking. He said, "Look, you dream about the final putt going in at the Masters, but you don't think about what comes next. I've always been a player that struggles to play after a big event. I always struggle to show up with motivation the next week because you've just accomplished something and you want to enjoy it." The results match the words. A stretch of quiet finishes at the next few majors, a missed cut, and a press conference where he admitted he didn't have a 5-year plan and didn't really know what came next. It wasn't his game that had slipped. By his own account, the drive just wasn't there. Here's the part that's easy to miss. That summer, as questions mounted over whether Rory could ever recapture his major form, Faldo actually pushed back on some of the criticism himself. He said people might be judging Rory too harshly, and that pulling off something so monumental after 11 years doesn't come with a guide for how you're supposed to feel afterward, or how you're supposed to play the next week. It's a strange position to be in. The same man who predicted the slump was now the one defending Rory against it. Twice now, Faldo had described what was happening inside Rory's head before Rory had even said it out loud himself. Then came the real test, the 2026 Masters. If Faldo had read the psychology correctly and read the post-win crash correctly, then another major wasn't supposed to come easily for Rory. Rory built a 6-shot lead through the first 2 rounds, the kind of cushion that usually means the tournament is already over. Then, he handed almost all of it back in the 3rd round, and by Sunday afternoon, he was tangled in a leaderboard that included Justin Rose, Cameron Young, and the world number 1, Scottie Scheffler. At one point on the front 9, he was 2 shots back. For a few holes, it looked like Faldo's Everest line was about to be proven right all over again. And that's exactly where the story turned. A bold approach over Rays Creek to 7 feet set up a birdie at 12. A long drive on the par 5 13th set up another. 2 birdies through Amen Corner swung the whole tournament, and he held on to beat Scheffler by a single shot, his 2nd Masters in a row. That made him only the 4th player in the tournament's 90-year history to win back-to-back, joining Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and Nick Faldo. Faldo, the same man who said doing this again would be nearly impossible, was standing in the exact club he'd told Rory not to expect to join. And that's the strange part of this whole story. Faldo wasn't wrong about what was going on in Rory's head. He called it before Augusta in 2025, and Rory confirmed it in his own words less than an hour after winning. He called the crash that followed, and Rory admitted to that too, without even being asked. Nobody wanted to give Faldo credit for either one at the time, as it looked too much like an old champion doubting a younger one. Instead, it was just a man who'd simply seen this exact pattern up close before. The only thing Faldo didn't count on was Rory refusing to let any of it stop him. Rory himself even said afterward that this 2nd Masters felt different from the first, less about relief and more about proving to himself he belonged in that company for good. Understanding a player's mind and predicting what he'll actually do with it turned out to be 2 very different things. Faldo got the diagnosis right, twice over. He just never accounted for how much Rory McIlroy would still want it, even after the emotion of Augusta had already been spent once. And maybe that's the real story here. Understanding someone and predicting them, it turns out, are 2 very different things. Faldo nailed the first one. Rory just made sure he lost the second.